Hello and welcome back to Zoodle Zoom-Ins. Previously on our Sandler series, we took a look at the beloved 1995 comedy classic Billy Madison. I recommend checking that video out in addition to this one for full context on the origin of Happy Madison. But here's a quick overview to get you up to speed. By the time of Billy Madison's production, Adam Sandler had been a writer and actor on Saturday Night Live for a few years already. He'd be fired along with Chris Farley just a couple months after its release, but he's made it clear that it came as no surprise, mostly due to the showrunner's attitude towards him and his friends leading up to that point. Comedy was always Sandler's passion first and foremost, which is why his time on the show was so important to him. He made a lot of friends, appeared in a few movies, and gained a level of fame and recognition previously unknown to him. Though his run on SNL was generally loved by the masses, not everyone was in the Sandman's corner. Critics viewed his performances as rather vulgar and juvenile, and the NBC executives shared a similar sentiment. However, the nail in the coffin was when the show's ratings started to plummet. Sandler dreaded his impending cut from SNL. He knew it was only a matter of time because corporate showrunners would inevitably blame the viewership drop on the current cast. He used the medium of film to convert his frustrations and insecurities into art, which resulted in Billy Madison, the foundation the Sandlerverse would eventually be sculpted upon. While Billy Madison didn't fare well critically, it was a smash hit in the box office, pulling in $26.4 million on a $10 million budget. His time doing what he loved on Saturday Night Live may have come to an end, but his newfound success in movies had only just begun to take flight. As it turns out, Billy's successor, Happy Gilmore, would reach even greater heights and join it among Sandler's renowned classics. Now that the stage has been set, let's dive into today's topic, Happy Gilmore. Released only 1 year and 6 days after Billy Madison, Happy Gilmore is the tale of a man with an aggressive passion for ice hockey. Despite his best efforts, however, he is unable to find professional success in the sport. Happy faces financial difficulties on top of that, as he finds out his grandmother is getting her house repossessed due to her massive debt to the IRS. She has to stay at a nursing home which secretly abuses and exploits its residents, and Happy is determined to get her house back. After stumbling upon his latent talent for golf, he is noticed by Derek Chubbs Peterson, who coaches Happy and helps guide him through the tournament scene in order to pay off his grandmother's debt. His success catches the ire of pro player Shooter McGavin, who does his best to sabotage our protagonist throughout the film by hiring a heckler and pulling cruel pranks.
If you're not doing anything later, why don't you join us at 9 o'clock on the 9th green?
Almost 9 o'clock.
Happy tries to win his grandmother's house back when it's put up for auction, but Shooter outbids him. This forces Happy to compete in the Tour Championship and face off against Shooter, which ends up being an intense and violent competition. Clearly, we can already piece together some parallels with the Sandman's career just with that brief synopsis. Happy Gilmore was released in February of 1996, less than a year after Sandler was let go from SNL. The hurt and frustration was fresh during the making of this film, and it is evident in the titular character. Happy Gilmore is frustrated, vengeful, and insecure. Sandler's dreaded suspicions had become reality, and he was forced to adapt during the aftermath that followed. In the film, Happy was failing at hockey and struggling to find ways to earn money in a career that he is passionate about. In Sandler's own life, he lost his job and had to find a way to continue earning money in a field he was extremely dedicated to: comedy. He started in stand-up, he refined his skills in sketch comedy, and loved everything that entailed working on SNL. He's even said in the past that he may have never left had he not been fired. In the end though, just like Happy's affinity for hockey, Sandler's ability to make it big doing the thing he loved wasn't working out anymore. He was hurt, but he masked it with anger. He channeled his frustration into something he's surprisingly amazing at: movies for Sandler and golf for Happy. His new skill takes him higher than anyone thought possible, netting him sponsorships, fame, and tons of cash. Happy's powerful slapshot wasn't enough to carry his hockey career, but in the context of golf, it allowed him to dominate the field with his 400-yard long drive. In real life, Adam Sandler applied some of the things he loved about comedy into the world of film, and found massive success. A lot of his early movies are heavily influenced by his sketch comedy routines, such as Waterboy notably being based on the Canteen Boy. Sandler's brand of comedy may not have fit in the context of SNL anymore, but when applied to cinema, his Slapshot landed him at the #1 spot on the list of SNL's most successful alumni. Happy Gilmore and Adam Sandler didn't find themselves where they initially wanted to be, but they applied their perceived flaws into mediums that better complemented their existing skill sets, and they broke new ground doing so. Billy Madison excelled at the box office using the same type of humor television critics vocally denounced, while Happy Gilmore's powerful swing helped him win the championship. Spoiler alert, by the way. In both cases, they played into their strengths and excelled beyond everyone's expectations, but they didn't do it without a little help along the way. Like its predecessor, Happy Gilmore has some serious talent behind its production. Bob Barker, host of Price is Right, plays himself and beats up Adam Sandler. It apparently brought the show increased viewership for a few years following the film's release. Ben Stiller appears as the abusive manager of the nursing home. You may recognize him from the hit sitcom Arrested Development. Carl Weathers plays Coach Chubbs. You may recognize him from the hit sitcom Arrested Development. In this movie, Weathers' character is missing his hand, which is a reference to that one scene in Predator.
That's too much!
Alan Covert didn't make it into Billy Madison, but he landed a role here as the homeless man Happy hires as a caddy. Perhaps this is a reference to the way Sandler helps his friends out by offering them roles in his films? Several real golf players and sportscasters appear in this movie as well, like Mark Lai and Lee Trevino. Even Abraham Lincoln appears in the heavens at the end, in a non-speaking role. While the film is full of amazing actors and media personalities, it's important to remember the heart and soul of the story ultimately comes from the Sandman himself. Tim Herlihy helped Adam Sandler write this movie and Billy Madison before it. You see, he and Adam actually go way back. They were roommates during their time at university, and he aided in writing material for Sandler's early stand-up career. Later on, the duo joined forces on SNL by continuing to write sketches together. Sandler's Herlihy Boy character was even named after him. Together, they created some of the most recognizable Sandler classics.
This guy, Tim Herlihy, he's my buddy since college. We were roommates, and we always talked about writing, and we were writing stand-up comedy together and stuff. And then we just started writing screenplays. We wrote Billy Madison, we wrote this together.
Given Herlihy's and Sandler's long-standing friendship and comedy endeavors before their time on the show, along with the fact that they acted as the sole writers of Happy Gilmore and came up with the movie's concept together, clearly drives home just how personal this story is at its core. Happy's whole gimmick of being a hockey player who's really good at golf was inspired by one of Sandler's childhood friends, Kyle McDonough. While playing golf together one day, Kyle consistently hit the ball much farther than anyone else. They joke this was probably due to his ice hockey skills. I think that bit of background knowledge really helps add to the film's personality. Now let's jump into some key scenes. After a heartwarming introduction that familiarizes the audience with Happy's character and showcases his destructive abilities, we see our main character having problems with the opposite sex. His soon-to-be ex-girlfriend insults his hockey skills and lack of drive, causing him to lash out at her before profusely apologizing multiple times. It shows the dangers of carrying so much anger in your heart, and where it could leave you if you don't find a proper outlet. Despite his name, Happy is anything but, and it leaves him desperate for human connection, as he ends up spending the night with a random passerby who happened to hear his soulful serenade through the intercom. This doesn't mean he's devoid of personal relationships, however. We soon see him expressing deep concern for his grandmother when he finds out she is having her house repossessed, going as far as to lay a brutal beatdown on the IRS agent. Later on, after winning the bet with the repo men and using his newly discovered ability to make petty cash from golfers, we see him standing in front of a pitching machine being pelted by balls in order to toughen up before next year's hockey tryouts. Chubbs Peterson, astounded by Happy's talents he showcased at the golfing range, introduces himself and unplugs the machine, encouraging him to focus on golf and offering to train him. Happy is dismissive of the idea and refuses to take it seriously, saying things like,
Golf requires goofy pants and a fat ass.
He holds this stance until he realizes how much money he could make in tournaments. It's a pivotal point in the film, as it provides even more insight into the mind of the story's author. Happy's plan is to torture himself needlessly in hopes of jumping back into the hockey team which rejected him already. This serves to portray the futility of Sandler's situation. Clearly, putting himself through unnecessary pain isn't going to get him any closer to where he wants to be. He was already turned down and he needs to move on. The symbolism behind Chubbs turning the machine off and showing him an alternative method of making a living with his talents by entering pro golf is a metaphor for Sandler's own change in direction. Early on in his career, he took a lot of criticism he received to heart and let it get to him at times. The pain he puts himself through in the batting cage is equivalent to ruminating on that criticism and letting it dominate your thoughts. Billy Madison's success was likely the wake-up call he needed in order to realize his best option was to ignore the naysayers and pour his efforts into the silver screen, where he was handsomely rewarded. He had been in some movies before Billy Madison, but it's clear that his SNL run was the highlight of that era in his eyes. The cinematic success he found was likely a big shock, and it was already a confusing and emotional period to navigate. It may have been easy to ignore the audience's love for it and focus on the critical reviews. Artists pour themselves into their artwork, after all. Sometimes we need a Chubbs Peterson figure in our life to snap us out of that funk and get us on the right track, whether it's a real person or just your own internal judgment. Next, we are introduced to the villain, Shooter McGavin, and the love interest, Virginia Bennett, the golf tour's PR director. They watch as he dominates the tournament, securing his spot on the tour. We learn one key detail in this section of the film, though. Happy sucks at putting. While he excels at applying force to his powerful swings, he struggles to land the more intricate, precise movements. This also ties into the movie analogy. Billy Madison may have been his biggest success at the time, but Adam Sandler's silver screen debut actually occurred in 1989 with the unsinkable Shecky Moskowitz, later titled Going Overboard. Sandler wasn't the head writer of this movie, but he did play the starring role. It wasn't very successful, only gaining its home release and current title after Billy Madison released 6 years later. So his first starring role was kind of a dud. His next appearances were shared with other big names, and it wasn't until his 6th appearance that he really blew up. Just like Happy's gradual mastery of putting throughout the movie, Adam Sandler had to learn from others to really get the details down. He struggled at first, shared the lead role with his co-stars, and finally hit that hole-in-one. This is brought up again later when Happy practices controlling his rage at a mini golf course and visits his happy place. He imagines a paradise for himself, and it soothes him to the point of being able to clear impossible obstacles on the golf course. Perhaps this is a metaphor for the method Adam Sandler uses to be successful in the industry. He has fun with all his movies and makes the most of all the experiences he gains from the process first and foremost. He offers roles to his friends, comes up with fun concepts for his stories, and tries his best to make you laugh. This carefree, joyous attitude is a huge part of what makes him so appealing. That also ties in with the scene at the tournament. Happy is almost kicked out of the tour because of his vulgarity and general misconduct, but Virginia Bennett convinces the board to keep him on because the audience is so captivated by him. They're selling out tickets in record time, all because of Happy. As said before, Happy doesn't take golf very seriously at this point in the movie. He curses a lot, beats people up, doesn't dress up at all, and causes property damage. The final tournament's prize was changed from a green coat to a gold coat in order to less resemble the actual Masters tournament, so it wouldn't come off as disrespectful. This is referenced with the line in the movie.
Gold jacket, green jacket, who gives a shit?
Happy is meant to come off as abrasive, but that's a key trait that makes him so entertaining, both within the world of the movie and the perspective of the audience. We love to see him snap and start fights with Bob Barker. It's a good parallel to the Sandman's own mass appeal. His humor is vulgar and offensive at times, which is what led to him getting kicked off the show. It just so happens that those same aspects of his comedy also had people lining up outside theaters a few years later. Shooter McGavin is constantly disgusted by Happy's lack of etiquette and sportsmanship, a sentiment which parallels that of the critics, who feel Sandler's style is desecrating the fine art of cinema regardless of their great ratings. Later on, we see Happy Gilmore enter a tournament and lose because of a heckler Shooter hired. He causes Happy to miss his shots by yelling right as he takes his swing, and saying things to rile him up. This is another reference to the effect criticism can have on artists who pour their soul into their work. Sometimes that negative criticism can manifest as your own self-doubt. I'm sure many of you have found yourselves in a similar position before. You think you're on the right track until you hear a voice yell the word "Jackass" and completely throw you off your game. Happy Gilmore teaches us how to process those feelings when he's trained by Chubbs later in the movie. He learns to tune those thoughts out and focus on the reason he's playing in the first place, his grandmother. For now, though, he's in the mood to beat some ass, and man, does this movie deliver. The fight between Happy Gilmore and Bob Barker is the stuff of legends. In case you didn't know, Bob Barker was trained to fight by Chuck Norris, and only agreed to be in the movie because of the extended fight scene. He also made sure he did his own stunt work for the movie. This fight was amazingly choreographed, shockingly brutal, and absolutely jaw-dropping. It was so good it even won the MTV Movie Award for Best Fight in 1996. This was the only award the movie won, though it was also nominated for Best Movie by Kids' Choice Awards. Adam Sandler was also nominated for Best Comedic Performance by MTV, as well as Worst Actor by the Golden Raspberry Awards. Yeah, he was considered both the best and the worst performance. You can probably chalk that up to the general anti-Sandler bias. People are almost as hard on him as they are on Sly Stallone, the only guy with more Razzies than the Sandman. These two fellas have received both the warmest praise and the coldest criticism of their works, which leads me to my next point. Happy Gilmore shares a lot of similarities with the Rocky franchise. My original intent was to point out the parallels between both movies' ice skating scenes. It serves as the first date between the protagonist and his love interest. It takes place in an ice rink after hours, and they are both meant to warm the audience up to the characters' relationships. As I thought about this more deeply, though, I realized the similarities don't end there. Both Happy Gilmore and Rocky are beloved in their respective sports communities. Both feature a down-on-his-luck working-class protagonist with a short fuse, who eventually gets noticed by a retired pro athlete and becomes coached in the ways of the sport. Both have some kick-ass montages with groovy soundtracks. Both characters want to quit at some point until their love interest convinces them to stay in the game.
Look, I did this so I could get Grandma's house back. Now I can. No regrets.
What do you think Grandma wants more? To get her house back or to see her grandson succeed?
There's one thing I want you to do for me.
What?
Come here. Win.
What are we waiting for?
They're both underdogs who achieve success by brute forcing their way through the competition, until they suffer an embarrassing defeat. It's after this point when Carl Weathers picks our hero up and teaches him the finer techniques of the sport, so he can pull one over on the antagonist at the end. Oh, and then he dies. Thankfully though, both Happy and Rocky manage to make him proud in the end. Rocky may place a larger emphasis on the love story than Happy Gilmore does, but both of them want you to hear the same message. You gotta be able to take a beating and still get back up. Both Rocky and Happy Gilmore were written by their lead actors, and both are deeply personal stories that mirror their real-life counterparts. They hit a wall, struggle to find their place or get ahead, and then live out their dreams in different ways. Sandler was coming off a bad breakup with SNL and dealing with some harsh criticism until he found his footing in the film industry. Stallone was trying and failing to land a lead role in a movie during a time where he really needed money, until his Rocky script was picked up and he found his footing in the movie industry. Happy was being rejected by a hockey team and struggling for cash until he made it big in golf. Rocky is facing a different problem in all of his movies, and he's always conflicted about fighting until someone motivates him. He of course achieves victory in addition to fame and fortune, just like the others. They're inspiring tales about underdogs who don't give up in the face of adversity, and it's easy to see why they hold a special place in moviegoers' hearts. That about wraps up the most major scenes I wanted to cover in this movie. I could talk about the final battle, but it's something you just have to witness for yourself. Overall, Happy Gilmore is just as influential as Billy Madison is in Adam Sandler's filmography. I'd even go as far as to say that it outperforms its predecessor in many ways. It has a lot of the major cornerstones of a good Adam Sandler flick. A great soundtrack, fun and diverse cast of characters, excellent slapstick humor, a silly premise, and a heartwarming message behind its story. Sandler's love interest may not have played a huge part in this movie, but Coach Chubbs was a delightful character that had a huge push on the plot, even after his untimely demise. Don't worry though, this isn't the last we see of that character. The Subway commercial laid the groundwork for the eventual Jack and Jill Dunkachino. Penguins, resembling the one that tormented Billy Madison, appear at the mini-golf course, where Happy works to conquer his own inner demons. Ben Stiller also reprises his role in Hubie Halloween. As for our final takeaway, Happy Gilmore is a story of personal growth, dealing with the complexities of love and grief, and playing into your strengths even when they don't line up with your dreams. This movie has a very real message behind it, a message I feel isn't really talked about in film very often. Sometimes your dreams don't work out, but that doesn't mean your whole life won't work out. Sometimes you can't get what you want, but maybe that's because there's something bigger and better lined up for you. Adam Sandler experienced it firsthand, and his movies parallel that, be it intentional or not. Most importantly, however, he makes you laugh and keeps a smile on your face throughout the 92-minute runtime. Thank you for listening. On our next visit to the Sandlerverse, we'll be zooming in on Waterboy, which follows one of the most pure and kind-hearted Adam Sandler characters yet. Before that, though, we have a few different projects lined up for your enjoyment. Until next time, I have been one half of Bazoodle Bites, signing off.
You just got sandoozled.
Price is wrong, bitch.